In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 28. Today we're talking with Tom Hespos and Eric Porez. They're a couple of old timers. In fact, Tom put together the Internet Oldtimers list. I'm here without Ritesh. He's got something in his eye or blurry eye. I don't know. He's dealing with his eyes. He's got to see, so he can't be here. But before I bring on our guests of honor, I just want to share with you that if you want to see more of this stuff, go to youshoulda.com. You can see past episodes. You can see upcoming guests. You can leave comments here. So if you're watching and want to heckle, we strongly encourage that. And of course, go to the YouTube channel and subscribe. We want to be influencers. We've got backlit shelves. We need it. Anyway, without further ado, I think it's time we bring these fantastic gentlemen onto the stage. Tom, Eric, great to see you.
Great to see you. Oh my God, it's been forever.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think back to those times and I'm like, 5-10 years ago. I'm like, no, it's been almost 30 years.
My God.
It's just amazing. So anyway, Eric,
yeah, as homage to that time, I went into the Internet Wayback Machine and I found my old school. This is circa 1997-98 agency.com t-shirt.
Yeah, that's the sort of second version of the logo that we had. The first one was before your time. It was called The Agency, and we didn't have the .com on it, and we dropped the and added the .com, and that was that logo. So that was before we had a little icon or anything. It's in particularly good shape too. I've got a couple of things there, but they're holy and not wearable.
Yeah, this one was put in like the sealed in the sarcophagus of internet lore. I think I still have. There was a time at which I don't know if you remember this, Kyle, but like at 665 Broadway, just like it is right now in the summertime in New York, the AC went out.
Uh-huh.
So the AC was out this was summer of '99. AC went out for like a week. And so a few people, our old colleague Matt Payton had a thermometer on his desk, and then you guys had put together shirts in terms of like it's getting hotter, where we had like this exploding thermometer. So I'll have to find that one and add it to the show notes.
Yeah,
I have nothing if not a wealth of useless information about our past.
Look, you always had that skill back then, and it's good to see that your brain is still functional. A big part of what Ritesh and I have learned doing this show is that things we thought we remembered, we weren't even close. You remember Mitch Golden, right?
Of course.
So after I think it was our first or second episode, Mitch sent us a 4-page email documenting why most of what we said was inaccurate and gave us the correct timeline. So the personalities, they still run deep at agency.com.
Yeah, that sounds very, very Mitch Golden to me. I'll be curious when Tim Atnell comes on and we could talk about let's see, what was the term he coined at the time was flexitecture.
Yeah,
right, which was flexible architecture. Yeah. It's like peanut butter. It's jelly. It's pelly. But that was Tim Atnell's claim to fame back in early development land.
Wow. Well, this is great. Why don't you each just do a quick 30-second intro and then we'll sort of dig in. So just give me 15, 20 seconds on what you're up to today and let people know who you are.
I'm consulting out of Underscore Marketing, the agency I founded back in 2002 with Eric and a couple of other folks. Now just helping companies that want to learn how to do integrated media.
Perfect.
And on my end, otherwise, if it weren't not for this show, I would be wearing my Meeting Science shirt. So I founded a software company called Meeting Science a couple of years ago. I like to say it's if Fitbit and Qualtrics had a baby that went to business school that wanted to try and tackle the meeting problem. So, companies today spend trillions of dollars in meetings. Most meetings suck, not all of them. And so our goal from a software perspective is to help companies understand the true cost, value, and impact of meetings, and then how to improve them. So I partnered up with a guy named Dr. Joseph Allen. He runs the Center for Meeting Effectiveness at the University of Utah, a true meeting scientist. So that as opposed to vaporware, we could actually bring the science behind how human performance ultimately thrives when you have certain protocols in place for meeting dynamics and meeting performance. So
awesome.
That's what I'm up to now.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, no, I mean, you guys have had really cool careers, and Tom, you put together the Internet Oldtimers list, so you've collected a bunch of us old fogies. Where we like to start with the show, and I'll start with you, Tom, is where we call in the beginning. So how did you discover the internet? Like, how did you, like, what was it for you? What were you doing before? How did you discover it? Did you have a big aha moment, an epiphany about it, that kind of thing? Just give us your origin story about how you came into this crazy world that we all shared over so many years.
Oh God, so much of this was timing. Like, I had the internet, back in undergrad, and I graduated in the spring of '94 into a really horrible job market. But, opportunities soon began to abound for, folks who could do stuff with the internet. And, I mean, I've heard it described by a comedian as, if you could spell internet back then, you were making six figures right out of school. And, I didn't get there for years, but, I by the fall of '94, I had started working for Y&R New York, and I was basically a secretary. And what I ended up doing was, I was typing a lot of letters that my media director was writing on, yellow legal pads, and they started to work on this recommendation for what eventually became GoArmy.com. I was working on the U.S. Army account. And, when the letter crossed my desk about the beginnings of this sort of recommendation, I was like, you guys have this all freaking wrong. And I just started laying into them about, like, well, here's what's wrong with the, what you think of the web. And here's what's wrong with, what you think about how this is going to build the Army's business. And next thing I know, I became the internet guy.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, you were just a little punk that was telling all these experts how they were wrong, and then they're like, "Oh my God, he knows something. Promote him."
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what was happening. Like, there were a lot of internal things happening at Y&R too. In the meantime, like, I had Angelina Kwok was right downstairs. She was basically the other secretary on the Army group. So she's obviously with the IAB today and the tech lab and all that she's doing. There were a lot of people within the organization who knew quite a bit about the internet. And, we all started to sort of come together a bit and figure out, what this meant for all the clients. And at the same time, there was all this stuff going on outside the company that was really, really intriguing to me. And, here I am, this secretary making like 20 grand a year. They eventually did move me into the media department, partly because of the internet knowledge, but, I kind of got stuck there. And, by 1996, I was like, I tried to get into Y&R New Technologies, which was the thing that became Brand Dialogue. And, a lot of people who were there who knew stuff about the internet, eventually got there. But I was kind of stuck in this Army position and I couldn't get out. And I don't know why, but that's what prompted me to move over to K2. Which was, one of the early public digital agencies, and eventually became, the head of the media department there. That's really kind of my origin story.
What was your what? It sounded like by the time you got to Y&R, you kind of knew what the internet was. How did you discover the net? Were you doing command line stuff in the early days? Like, what did you
running around on Usenet in school? I was a failed computer science major too.
Yeah,
so
me too.
I dropped that major. It was
I dropped mine in 2 months. So yeah, I went for that.
They started me out in the music department. I'm like, this isn't going to pay anything. Let me go over to comp sci. I kind of know that because I've been programming since I was a little kid. And, then I'm like, there are people with so much natural talent for this that's going to just eclipse all of my hard work. Let me go into something else. So then it was mass communications I moved into. So it's the marriage of those two worlds. So I had a lot of it in undergrad and, we had Mosaic, and Netscape didn't even come out until I was already at Y&R. So
yeah, exactly. How about you, Eric? What was your how did you come up?
Yeah, the early moment. So when I was so I did my undergraduate at Duke, and in my junior year, so I graduated in '97, so only slightly younger than Tom. So junior year, circa '95 to '96, I took an internship at Disney, Walt Disney Company, this, that, the other. It was through the gentleman who ran a program. He ran business development for. There was a division within Disney called Disney Educational Publishing. So it was at 114 Fifth Avenue. And Don Burton ran biz dev for that. And effectively what it was trying to create, redesign or reimagine education. So taking the latest and greatest in early learning and cognitive research around learning, and Harvard Project Zero. And I still have all the books from that time on the shelf. And it was, how do we create an integrated K-12 curriculum and bring it to the school and home educational markets using a whole new character set. So thinking about it from like what characters could be critical thinkers, creative thinkers, metacognitive thinkers, what have you. So I started working for Don, and they're like, oh shit, we forgot this whole internet thing. You figure it out. So my job, the old adage from Kyle back in agency.com days, and this is pre-agency or pre my experience with agency, right? But Kyle's old mantra was, figure out what sucks and don't do that.
That's it.
And I always remember it to this day, right? To this day, I still remember it to this day. And so my job was to figure out what sucked on the internet at that time, circa 95, 96. Don't do that, and start figuring out, okay, what strategy could we do? What can we put in place? What can we put in place? How can we approach education, digital education? Again, applying what we knew at the time about what it could be. So, and then what preceded that, of course, my college in my college experience, right, as Tom said, like we grew up with the internet, right? So within that couple of years, that kind of like 92, 93 to 96, 97, we all had it at our fingertips, right? We all had, I still remember my email address at school. I was also a failed computer science. I had studied a bit of computer science in college just because I wanted to get a little bit smart about it, but then I was too dumb, to Tom's point. Like I applied for a job after college at MicroStrategy, and it was this crazy programming test that I just bombed. But what I was pretty good at was leadership, or in terms of at least what I thought of, managing other people. And so post Disney, when there was one job for a company called Sidex International, which I won't bore you with the details of unless you really want them. But when I started an agency in June of '98, I started at the time we called it producers, right? We were producing these shows, these experiences for brands, which then that migrated itself into project management. And so for me, I got my teeth cut in terms of really understanding. What I liked about the project management role is that you could see everything, right? You got this overview of, you were like an orchestra conductor, right? And I come, similar to Tom, come from a music background, classically trained concert pianist. And so, but it's like, okay, I can really conduct a team to lead to some kind of successful outcome on behalf of a client. So it's like, you can go a little bit deep, right? You can have certain I would call it either M-shaped or T-shaped experience, where you're kind of wide around the shoulders, and then you can go deep in a couple of different places. But really, that was my birthing of the web. Started at Disney, and then it really grew, I'd say, exponentially as agency.com grew in that crazy time.
Mm-hmm. Did you have was there any moment where you went from sort of understanding computers to realization about the power of the internet? Like, did you have a moment where that hit you, or was it just kind of osmosis? It just,
honestly, I think it was osmosis. There really wasn't any one particular time. Although I suppose it was like, maybe it was a little bit that Disney experience, where it's like, wow, this giant corporation, Disney, has got Imagineers running around left, right, and center, but they're giving it to me.
Oh wow, yeah.
To try and figure out, like, okay, what's our internet strategy for this new business? So it's like, okay, well, shit, let's giddy up, right? So it was very much accelerated osmosis, I would say, in that time period. That then just led me to look for other experiences post college, and then which eventually led me to working for you.
Wow, that's so cool. Hey, Ritesh, it looks like Ritesh is in the waiting room at the doctor's. Hey, Ritesh, good to see you, buddy. Feel better. And it looks like he didn't know about your experience at K2, Tom.
That was fun. That was fun. That was a fun place to work. Of course we were, competitors at the time, but there was so much fun going on, like at spots like that. It would be like, I remember like Matt DeGannon, who was the chairman, and the head of the agency at K2, would like regularly get up on top of the cubes in the workspace with a Nerf bow and arrow and just start stalking people. Stuff like that just like should never happen at a company, but it was just so fun, and it did.
Yeah.
That kind of work environment. Like I loved it. I loved it so much.
Well, and speaking of bow and arrow, Tom, there was a point at which Aaron Sugarman, who was the president of AC.com New York, literally was dressed up as Robin Hood. In tights, running around.
And he had nice legs.
In green. He totally embraced it. Totally worked for him. And ran around the office. Maybe it was more Pied Piper than it was bow and arrow. But that's the common link between K2 and agency at the time, I suppose.
Yeah. Men in tights. We took Halloween very seriously. If you came in costume, you would get to leave, at lunch or something like that. You could leave early that day. I do remember one time I thought it would be a good idea with this body to come in as an 80s rocker. So I came in full spandex, like 80s black and white spandex. And there were a number of comments made to HR that if I could please not be in character or not come to client meetings, it would be appreciated. So of course that made me.
What they made Kyle do, for those who can now see it, is they dressed him up in an actual button-down shirt, and then we have this great phrase here. One of the reasons the internet has become so popular is that people have this buried hunger to reconnect. This was Interbrand, the future of brands, where Kyle got to be featured along with other interesting luminaries, such as Deepak Chopra, for instance. So Lee Clow, the infamous Lee Clow, Spike Lee. So pretty interesting. Howard Schultz as well. So if you're talking about old school, I have some fun experiences. But Kyle, man, real deal here in the Interbrand lore.
Yeah, I kind of diss Microsoft in there a bit, but but I do celebrate Apple and Steve Jobs, so there's always that. We were big Apple fanboys back in the day. We'll talk about. So you started it at 665 Broadway, right, Eric?
Yes, sir.
So what was it like when you got there? Where were you working? What Just talk about sort of the environment and it sounds like you were fresh out of school, so you came in.
Yeah, so I was. No, you're right, Carl. So I was a year out of school. I had worked at a company previous to that called Sidex, which was the Industrial Manufacturing and Catalog Showcase. And if you remember back then, whether you remember that then or why would you know this, but there was something called the Thomas Register, which was it was like the Encyclopedia Britannica of manufacturing. Yeah. And so 110,000 manufacturers, from pens to knobs, and to take your pick. And so the way business got done back then was you would, if you were a manufacturer, you had to go through this giant catalog and figure out, okay, who are my suppliers that could send me or build me this widget, and then you call them on the phone. And so there's all sorts of the craziness that now, it's all marketplaces. So Sidex said, oh, you know what we can do? And of course, now that the statute of limitation has run out, I could tell these stories. We took the Thomas Register and we sent it to the Philippines for OCR, and then effectively we were trying to create this the digital version of the Industrial Catalog and Manufacturing Showcase, and so we got investment from a company called Bonta, which is this huge printing company way back in the day. And so that was our mission. Our mission was to build this catalog, and it was going pretty well until the Thomas Register figured out what the founders had done, And then the company closed pretty quickly.
It got ceased and desisted out of existence.
Yes, it was basically ceased and desisted out of existence. And so I had seen, I had seen Chan at an internet, like pre 212 days. I forget, NINMA, that's what it was, New York New Media Association.
Yep.
I saw him present at one of those events, and so I wrote him a letter, and that was my intro to agency.com. Got an interview, and then started working on the 4th floor of 665 Broadway. I was working on the MetLife team with the people like Boo Sabrion or Jose, who's now over at Merkle. Andrew Purcell, who had a storied career both as producer, like he was my senior producer at the time, and then he ultimately went on to still has this great career in terms of information architecture and design. Hubert Etchison, who taught us the motherfucker rule, which I think is absolutely, to this day in terms of client service and management is as important today as it was then. And the rule was, any sentence, if you were going to write something to a client and you could end the sentence with comma motherfucker, it's like probably not the thing you wanted to write. And so what that did for me is, from then all the way through to today, whenever I was on an email platform, I would be in an email, I would always delay my emails. I would always delay them. And whether it was Outlook, you actually had to set the rule in Outlook so it wouldn't send for a minute or 2 minutes. So you could have that cognitive moment to say, oh shit, I really want to, let me go back and change that. So that was the motherfucker rule applies now as much as it did then. And we worked for MetLife.
That's great.
And so
you worked with Tim Carrier, right? Because Tim Carrier became the expert on all of the Peanuts characters.
So it was Tim, and there was Polly Lieberman. Polly was my client, and of course, coming full circle, when Tom and I were at Underscore, then Polly went on to the sales side. It was we were trying to figure out, like, how do we position group long-term healthcare insurance and do it in an easy way for individuals, individual health providers, or individuals, human beings, not the health providers, to understand how long-term care insurance works. And so, but it was a great team, and of course back then there was no sense of, there was a sense of time, in the sense of, like, okay, you got to get a project done by a certain period of time, but to this day, I think, agency, and maybe there's one other experience I have in terms of large organizations, right? So Tom and I built, Underscore to a certain size, but in terms of companies that scaled rapidly, I would say agency and Rocket Fuel had these similar experiences of everybody was there, everybody knew what the mission was, right? It was like, okay, figure out what sucks, don't do that, create excellent work. And also, don't be a dick when it came to working with other people. Mm-hmm. Like, we're all in this together, so we need to make the best of it. And so I really think about that from team to team to team. And, as we got bigger, then things got a little bit weird. There were some other people that were brought in externally and whatnot. But I still remember that experience of ultimately the camaraderie, and that camaraderie exists today, right? Like the agency.com alumni network is extraordinary in terms of, whether it would be Ben Jones when we co-led a pitch to GM, or whether it be David Blackburn when it was like late night, David and I and this designer Min Chang we would be playing Doom in the middle of the night, and I always remember Min's screen name was Fluffy Bunny to this day. So whenever I see him, I always say, "Hey, Fluffy Bunny, how are you?" Or whether it was me playing Mario Kart with James Plath, like, all these people still have that relationship, right? There's still that, exactly. Ritesh is saying Mario Kart battles with James Plath, and it was true. We still have that camaraderie. And so I feel like in many cases, and sorry for blah, 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 I feel like I could pick up the phone really with anybody from that time. Yeah. And it's kind of like, you didn't, whether it be a year, 5 years, 10 years, even 20 years. Yeah. It's still, there's still that connection. You pick up exactly, Tom. You pick up right where you left off.
Tom, was it like that at K2? Was there that sort of sense of all for one for all? Was it, talk about the culture there?
The culture there was just terrific. Like, I don't know that I've even had like a unifying experience like that since K2. And, things did end up going off the rails there, like people were coming and going. But, at the time, it was just like, it was so phenomenal to work there because, you know, not only did you have Nerf bow and arrows and all that neat stuff, but we did all know like what the mission was, and we did understand that. And you know, it didn't matter that we were regularly working until like 2 a.m. putting media plans together and all that neat stuff, because we knew we had to get to a certain place, and, you know, whatever it took to get there, that's, you know, what we were going to do. So
yeah,
I loved the culture there. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And Tom, I was just going to say to that point, like, and it wasn't, especially at agency, and it sounds like it was a K2OL, it wasn't like a slave driving culture either. It was we just have to get it done.
Yep.
Because a lot of the times we're all doing this for the first time, so it's like, well, shit, like
you didn't have all the automation tools that you have now. You know, like everything had to be done pretty much manually, and then we were building the systems to automate them as we were going. So, like, you know, ad servers and all, you know, all the analytics stuff and all that, and, you know, and like, new, you know, rich media formats and stuff like that.
Commerce engines. Yeah. Well, one of the things that's kind of emerged in doing these shows is, you know, you couldn't get a degree in what we were doing, right? So everyone came from some other discipline, and very often it was you know, sort of you know, people who didn't get their degree in computer science, right? They had a lot of different interests, so it was people that could sort of synthesize a lot of stuff. There was a sense of curiosity I felt that drove everything. Like everyone that worked at agency in those early days was like curious about, well, how can we make this work? How can we do it? And there was something about that when you had that many people that curious and ambitious combined. It was a really bonding thing, and it was late hours. But to your point, it wasn't you have to be here till midnight. It was just, we've got stuff to do.
You know, figuring stuff out on the fly. Like I love that aspect of the internet culture back then. Like, so even when I was at Y&R, like, you know, they were putting me through media school, which is, you know, Y&R's media school is like they put you on a brand and you basically work with your group to come up with a communications plan over the course of several months. And I'm like, I'm going to deviate from the script here, and I'm going to come up with a website for, you know, Chili pudding snacks, which was the product that they put us on. And like, you know, you would just have to figure it out as you go. And I had to teach myself HTML. So, you know, I still have the book on the shelf that you can't see over here, but, you know, it's Laura LeMay's, you know, Teach Yourself HTML in 21 Days, which is the book that everybody had, you know.
Exactly. You know, not to rain on your parade or anything, but there were only like 8 HTML tags back then. So it wasn't.
It's not really a language, but I'm not going to tell people that because they're going to think I'm smart. So,
Well, let's use the blink tag.
Exactly.
Tag. That was the ninth. That was the ninth tag, right? After the DR and the P.
Awesome tag.
The P.
Yeah.
Right.
So talk to me about so one of the things we all share is we got to work on some projects that were truly remarkable. So talk to me about something you worked on that where either you did something groundbreaking or, you know, you broke something, you know, you did something that was important that exploded, but like share with me some work that you worked on that you felt like, holy crap, I get to do this, or we get to do this. That really felt like it might be something we take for granted today, but it was a big deal back then. Either one of you.
Jeez. I remember this is when I was still at Y&R. There was a guy there who was like in account management named Chuck Windsor, and Chuck was like, he was bullish on the web. He's an older guy, but like just really got it and really understood like what you know, what the web could bring to like Army recruiting. And he was the guy who was also sort of like in charge of all the art files that were, you know, in residence at Y&R with like all the shoots they had done and everything like that. So like one day I went to Chuck and I'm like, there's something I want to play with here. And, you know, it's this animated GIF thing. And so he let me go wild in the art files. And, you know, this was just in addition to all like the media planning stuff I was supposed to be doing. But like he let me go in there and like fiddle around with it. And like I managed to, even though I don't really have an artistic bone in my body with respect to creative, like I managed to animate the rotors on an Apache helicopter.
That's so cool.
And Chuck just like grabbed this thing like off a disk on my PC in my office, ran it like somewhere, like he just took off with it. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And if you actually went into like, this is the Army's first animated ad. And all of a sudden I was placing the ad that I had created. And it was, GIF 89A, and the thing was a mammoth. Like, I didn't do anything to reduce the file size. I had it on like a 3.5-inch disc here somewhere. But like, I was really happy that somebody gave me the runway to like actually create an ad and place it. I thought that was one of the coolest things ever.
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, something super simple. How about you, Eric? What jumps to mind as something you were like, holy crap, we get to do this?
Yeah, so two things come to mind. One of them agency related and one of them semi-agency related. So certainly I would say when my agency experience, and I still have like the Webby Award up on the shelf back there for it, was Sprint Ion, right? So Sprint Ion are things that we take for granted today that were like, oh my God, totally innovative then. Was what they called an integrated on-demand network. And it was a multi-billion-dollar investment that Sprint made to give you in your home one device that could manage phone, internet, fax, and it was like, whoa, this is unbelievable, this is totally groundbreaking, etc. And so the product itself didn't even exist, but we were responsible for building not only the front end application in terms of understanding like how you as a consumer could navigate Ion. We were also responsible for the media plan that was associated with driving demands for Ion, because they were doing it in these test markets, right? So they're doing it in Kansas City, and there were 2 other cities that they were doing it. And so it was one of the early, and then we also had to build a CRM. Like CRM didn't exist back in 1999. So we had to build a system. I still have the booklet of like the document that we had presented to Sprint, and it was me, and it was Matt Payton, it was Martin Kineen, and others that were part. It was Alvin Kwok, and it was Andrew, and we had this whole crew of people, Lawrence Hill, Tony Ward on QA, and so there was an entire team. Koi Ong, we had this amazing Natalie Moore, still a great friend to this day.
Wow.
Again, this crazy band of misfits that were building the backbone, the CRM backbone, in addition to this media, so driving demand for a product that didn't exist, a CRM that said it's coming soon. We had to build that from scratch.
Wow.
So that was a pretty amazing, to your point, of like an aha experience. And I would also say it was an early example, not to pat you on the back too much, Kyle, but I will, but it was an early example of how an integrated agency really could work from the perspective of not only the delivery of the platform, but also the delivery of the media. So the combination of being able to provide that truly holistic service, which really didn't exist then. So that was number one. The second one, and Troy Kelly alluded to this when he did the thing with you, is Matt Payton and I started everybody had a side hustle back then. And the thing I didn't know at the time, having listened to these, is that there were so many like agency people who became quite rich from being day traders. I'm like, shit, why didn't I get?
I know they never clued me in on that crap.
They never clued me in that. But Matt and I had a side business called Outrageous Media, or as our clients call it, Outrageous Fedia. And one of the things that we got to do is we got to produce Michael Jackson's first webcast. It was he did this Millennium concert in Munich Stadium, and back then, imagine what we take for granted. This interaction, right? YouTube, take your pick. Back then, it was like this postage stamp size ISDN dial-up crazy. You could sort of see faces jerking, herky-jerky, but it was this live streaming experience of Michael Jackson doing a concert in Olympic Stadium. And so the details of it are kind of crazy. Matt's undergraduate teacher at NYU had this strategy role with a company called MCY. And we always like to say, MCY, do they have a business plan? But they got a bunch of money out of Bertelsmann, and then they convinced Michael Jackson's management to give them the internet broadcast rights to do this show.
Wow.
And so myself and Matt, we flew over to Munich, and we had a bunch of people with us, a bunch of sort of agency alumni or agency people who were still working at agency at the time, to produce this show. So the show was so successful, we brought down, I'm trying to remember which system, it was one of the top 10 internet broadcasts of all time, in addition to it was Victoria's Secret and then Michael Jackson in Munich.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. But then we got to pitch Michael Jackson for his Millennium concert that he was going to do over the world around Y2K. And so we actually called it MJY2K. If I'm able to share, I can even show. I even went back and found the presentation that we gave to Michael Jackson. But I literally, to make a long story boring, if we have time, I literally sat across the table. It was me. There were 6 of us in the room. It was myself. It was Matt Payton. It was a guy named it was Ray Short and his sister Lisa, and this other guy named Adam Holdenbosch, who had a company called Mass Transmit at the time. And we presented to Michael Jackson how we would go about putting together an internet broadcast for this Y2K set of concerts that he was going to do around the world. And everything I learned about
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, exactly. Everything I learned about how to deliver a presentation and how to do a presentation and how to make a presentation with storytelling, I learned from being able to put together a pitch to the beloved one, who, by the way, was super nice. He shook everybody's hands. He had a bunch of questions. He applauded at the end of the presentation, and then we ultimately won that business. And so that was going to be our launch point to, like, Matt and I were going to leave our not cushy jobs, but our jobs at agency. We're going to start our own thing. But there was a catch, and there's always a catch in these stories. And the catch was, this is September of 1999 that we're pitching this business for Michael Jackson. And at the time, he was going to do a concert in Australia, and then he was going to fly over the dateline to do a concert in Honolulu. It was Honolulu to Australia, and then there were going to be other concerts around the world, and it was like Springsteen was going to do one, and Madonna was going to do one. The problem was, at the time, none of the venues were secured, and none of the artists were secured. And so we're like, well, we're getting paid to do this pitch no matter what, so let's make the best of it. But we were always a little bit suspect as to whether this concert would actually get pulled off. And in the end, it didn't get pulled off. And Michael Jackson's cover was that the Australian government, because of Y2K, wouldn't let him fly across the international dateline because they were worried about what would happen in terms of planes and the Y2K bug and all this other nonsense. So he was able to get out of.
Planes are going to fall out of the sky, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so he was able to get out of that commitment, sort of, because then fast forward 4 years later, and the story can go on and on. Fast forward 4 years later, Matt and I get deposed by a concert promoter called Big Events in Europe, because Big Events was in a dispute with Michael Jackson's business manager as well as Jackson about this Millennium concert. They had found our contact info on a piece of paper. Matt and I then drew straws as to who was going to fly out to Los Angeles and be deposed for this case, in terms of these dueling production companies and lawyers and this, that, the other. But at the time, we said, look, authentically, like we got paid to do a pitch. We thought it was going to happen. So that was the best that we could do.
Wow.
Absolutely. But that was crazy. It was just like being able to do that with Jackson. And then that led us to be able to do, we did Paul McCartney's Return to the Cavern Club in Liverpool. So we got to do that webcast as well. That was pretty special in those times for me.
Wow. Absolutely amazing. I mean, that was the thing. At one point, Howard Stern walked into my office, and another time my assistant said, Prince is on the line. I'm like, what? I don't know. He wants to talk about a website. And he's like, hello. In an amazingly low voice, but yeah, that was crazy time. And, it was, there were personalities like that, but it was also just the ability to, walk into, Nike headquarters or, these big organizations where you're like, we're just a couple of snot-nosed punks that know a little bit about the internet getting to do this stuff.
Yeah. And to your point about snot-nosed punks, like I called up for the Jackson pitch, I had called up NASA to figure out whether we could launch a, so what we wanted to do for this concert is we wanted to have everybody put their wishes for the Millennium in this, and it was going to be this multi-distributed broadcast. So up in the Jumbotrons, you would see everybody's wishes for the Millennium. Oh, wow. And then we wanted to take all of those wishes and put them in a time capsule and then put it on a space shuttle and blast it into space, so that the Y2K, like the wishes for the Millennium, would be circulating the Earth
forever. Yeah.
Forever. And like, and back then it was like, well, shit, why not?
Yeah.
And see, like, logistically, could we actually do that? And what was the payload cost and all that sort of nonsense? So it was pretty
Figuring out how to do stuff that nobody did before.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, what? So let's shift gears a bit. So these were sort of clearly very formative times, and it sounds like similarly, professionally, the kind of relationships that you maintain to this day. Talk about what you learned from those days. Like, what did you carry forward? What did you leave behind? Tom, share with me. Like, I know you. I mean, talk about what you guys did together, but also just sort of as you came out of this intense time from like the mid '90s to the early 2000s, and you moved on in your career. What did you take from it? How did it shape you, and what did you carry forward?
For me, I learned to trust my gut. It was like I always, would be the guy who didn't have faith in himself. And, one of the defining moments, I think, in my career was like after 9/11, and, I had been, the chief media guy at an agency that, ended up firing me. They weren't doing well, post 9/11, and they just, they let me go. They happened to let me go at around the same time that Tim McHale got let go.
Oh, wow.
And, we decided to go, have lunch, and then the rest is history. But like knowing, that we both had this sort of faith that, after the first, .com boom and crash, that all this stuff was coming back. Like none of it was going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And, it was a tremendous leap of faith to, believe in that. But like we believed that in our hearts. And that led to the launching of Underscore. And like from that, I just really learned to trust my gut. Like we used to say to each other, at the time, like we know this is coming back. We know this isn't going anywhere. This is now part of our experience. We got a lot of stuff to figure out with the internet and how it fits in, but like we're gonna figure it out. Yeah. And that realization was just something I really took with me for the rest of my career.
Yeah. How about you, Eric? What stayed with you?
So rigorous follow through, and the phone doesn't ring on its own. You make it ring.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So I think those are the two things that have survived to this day. Mm-hmm. In addition to don't treat people like treat people the way you want to be treated, and which is again it seems kind of commonplace, and yet when I worked at after agency, I went to Time Inc., and that was right during the Time Warner merger. And so I got to go from, sort of giant company, Disney, small division, to sort of small company that grew very quickly, agency.com, and then back to giant conglomerate. And there were a bunch of assholes that worked in that company. Yeah. And so it's like, hopefully I don't ever want to have to work in that kind of milieu. Right. And so when Underscore was getting going, right. And, Tom and Tim really started, but Tim was the glue. For those who don't know in this this podcast, Tim unfortunately passed away not too long ago. But Tim was the one that was the link between myself and Tom, because Tim and I worked together at agency, and we had a healthy, I think we had a healthy admiration of each other's skills. Mm-hmm. They were somewhat complementary, and there was a little bit of overlap, but not too much. Yeah. And he said, hey, we're starting this thing called Underscore, and that was right at the time I had left, so I got so fed up with kind of big corporate company, Time Inc. fortune-y thing that I took a role as an interim managing director of a company up in Purchase, New York, that actually Ritesh had introduced me to, and that was a total disaster. So that did not last very long. And then to that point of Tom, it was like circa 2002. I'm like, well, shit. Now what am I going to do? Yeah. And it was a phone call that that Tim had given to me and said, hey, we're starting this thing. Maybe you want to get the band together. And I think to Tom's point, at that time, I think one of the things that enabled Underscore to thrive or to build the business initially was that so many agencies had shuttered their media departments. Oh. And so then they're like, well, but the client work hasn't really stopped. It slowed down, but it didn't stop.
It's still going.
Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Now we need to field a team, and we can't hire people fast enough because people have kind of headed for the hills. So, Tom and I and Tim, adopted this, what we call this Intel Inside approach, which was like, hey, look, we will effectively be your media agency. You can put our names or put your company on the business card, but we'll take whatever business we can. to keep to get the work going, really to start building the credibility around the agency. And so it didn't have to necessarily be branded _ marketing at the time.
Yeah.
It was whoever's company marketing and our ability to then effectively deliver integrated media strategy and plans that then really sort of built that business. But
that was a leap of faith too, because like my experience with Tim up until that point was he had left Blue Marble to go work for agency and told me like, oh, I'm leaving an awesome opportunity, you should step in. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that.
Oh, wow.
And so I left K2 to go to Blue Marble and take over Tim's position there, whereupon Tim promptly stole all of his old staff to go work at agency. So I had to rebuild the thing from scratch. But and I still loved him and still wanted to go into business with him. But
what was the inspiration or what was the focus? Sounds like Underscore was a media agency. I mean, did you have a particular focus? What was it? Just like what made you start your own thing rather than go somewhere else?
I didn't want to get fired again. That was because that felt bad.
Yeah.
But again, it was like, knowledge that it was all coming back, and we wanted to take more of an integrated approach. So like at Y&R, I had also done, planning for television and radio and print and all that stuff. And they wanted to pull all of that together in a truly integrated fashion. So we focused on that, and it resonated really, really well with a lot of the clients that we worked with, especially the folks who were, Intel inside. Like they wanted an agile, small group that was able to step in and, walk into pitches and be able to win them business so that they could happily do all the creative and production. And we would just handle the media piece of it, which nobody really wanted to handle at the time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right. And then similar to that, and the flip side was also true, where at Underscore, when we started to build a little bit more credibility ourselves, we could say to clients, hey, you know what, we work with a best of breed sort of hub and spoke model. So it's not like we've got, because, creatives notoriously can be a little finical and finicky, I should say. And so it's like, well, hey, you know what? We work with a creative agency that has the following really good set of skills in X, or a really good set of skills in Y or Z. And so we weren't beholden to one agency framework when it came to pitching business that was a combination of creative plus media. Again, going back to that Sprint example, Kyle, going back to that example where we could really combine best of breed services, but to do it in more of a network oriented approach than one.
Yeah, that's smart. Then you don't have the crushing overhead, if you lose a client that you've got to jettison an office or two. So
right. No, it's true. No, it's 100%. You're right.
The thing that broke my heart though about that, the launch of that agency was, I had to, you talked earlier about like the old timers list and stuff like that. Like it had this great little community going online where, it started out actually as a way that for people to not lose track of one another at .com parties. Like we were literally we were going out every night. This is when we're in our 20s and you had the resilience to do that. But, we'd be going, oh, we're going to hit double click Oompa Loompa party. And then we're going to go here. And people would just lose one another. And people didn't have cell phones at the time, in widespread use. So, that's what we did. We ended up making an email list so we could find out where everybody was going and where everybody was going to be. And then, somebody asked a serious question about their job. And then, it became this more serious community for people who, got into the business early. Mm-hmm. And we had this wonderful little, community that was thriving and it was doing good. It was, helping some of our companies get funded. It was helping people get jobs. It was doing all these great things. And, I had to speak to one of my business mentors, Dave Morgan, who,
I know Dave.
Real Media and, Dakota. And, he's one of my guys that I go to pretty frequently for advice. And I'm like, I have this great fledgling business that's a media agency and I'm working with some great people on. I've got this little community that I love and I think is perfect. I just I think I might not have to focus on one and not the other. And Dave said, yeah, you know what? Focus on Underscore, get it going, do what you need to do and find somebody else to take care of old timers. And, I tried my best to do that. Andy Borland, God rest his soul, of ClickZ fame, took it for a while until he really got sick and unfortunately passed away. It's flipped a couple of times since then, but that thing was just such. It was a child of mine that I wish I had the ability to hang on to, but I think that Dave had the presence of mind and the acumen to say, hey, you know what? Like, you really need to focus on launching your other business. That's the one you need to focus on. I'm glad he was able to do that.
Wow. That's great. Well, I mean, this has just been amazing. I mean, it's great seeing you guys. And I mean, talk to me a little bit about, what's sort of current for you guys. What are you excited about? Is there any trends, anything going on now that you kind of harken back to those days, or any insights you've got?
Well, let's see. The insights I have are, and we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show, so to speak. Maybe it's more of an anecdote, which was, if you're going to try and get acquired by a company, don't talk about it in the restaurant around the corner from the company. So when it comes to sort of marrying business acumen with outcomes. So the story I'll relay is the following, at least as I understood it. Back in the day when iTraffic wanted to get acquired by agency.com, they were going to come in and pitch you, Kyle, and Chan. And so they went to, I guess this is more like Andy Grove, only the paranoid survive. Stay classy, stay crazy, but also stay a little paranoid. It might be the trend today, which is, they wound up going. I think they went to. I'm trying to remember the restaurant that was above Fez, around the corner from agency's office at 665 Broadway. But anyway, the point is that the iTraffic founders were having a conversation about, well, what do we think we can sell for? So what do we think we're worth? And it turns out that literally at the table next door was one of the agency's biz dev guys, Drew D'Amico. And so of course, Drew, upon hearing this information, immediately runs back to the office and tells you guys, well, here's how much they're worth, or here's how much they think they're worth. Yeah. Which gave you the ultimate negotiating leverage when it came to acquiring them for what we thought, or what agency thought was the fair market value. Yeah. And so how that transitions to Tom, like Tom's negotiating school 101 or negotiating 101 is like, don't speak first. Oh. Let there be time. Let
there be long, awkward pauses.
Yeah. Let there be long, awkward pauses, because people want to fill the space with babble, and so generally you can make mistakes in that way. And so that's, I don't know if that transitions today exactly in a clear line to Kyle, but I think about. I definitely think about having a healthy paranoia about your business is probably a good thing. Yeah. At the same time, I also say that don't focus on your competitors too much, right? So in my own business, right? So I started a software company 2 years ago. I did a little friends and family round plus my own money. Although I'd like to say my family's poor, so really just a friend raising round plus my own capital plus revenue now coming from customers. And I think about competition, but I don't think about it too much. Because what I found in my experience is that, especially from a salesperson perspective, is if you're always focusing on your competitor, you're not focusing on your customer. And so when I think about like agency.com, I don't think we gave two flying fucks about whether it be K2 or anybody else. Like, it didn't really matter. It was just like, if you focus on the customer, ignore everything else. Yep. I mean, yes, it's helpful to understand maybe a little bit what this other company is doing, but the moment you bring up another company in conversation, you immediately distract from the task at hand. Yep. So I would say that, that's been a long-standing an axiom that I think about, which is like, if you focus on the customer and what the customer needs, good things will happen. If you focus on who your competition is and what the competition does, then you're distracted from that.
You'll just make yourself crazy. Yeah. The only thing I focused on with competition was understand them well enough to know how to position what we did, preempt what we knew they were going to pitch, so that by the time they pitched it, we had discredited it in our pitch. Like,
right.
That was my thing.
Yeah. Some breadcrumbs.
Yeah. We talk in our current business about, Monique and I, my co-founder, we talk about, we like our employees to have a healthy level of neuroticism, where, it's just those people that are like, is it okay? Is it going to be okay? Like, there's a certain level of that's really good. It's similar to a parallel to the paranoid thing is be a little bit paranoid, be a little bit neurotic, because I think why you start a business is you're a little neurotic. Like there could be a better way here. There could, know what? Fuck it. I'll start my own company. So, where are you? What are you excited about these days, Tom?
I'm excited about where digital media buying and like where, the digital sort of part of the, the contract between user and publisher and, agent, where all that's sort of going, because, we've got the third party cookie deprecation. We've got all the, the stuff that's going to basically take apart programmatic media buying, and we're going to have to put it back together. And, we're from this generation, that is used to having, chaos. You ever see like The Fifth Element, where Gary Oldman's character like just swipes off the desk, and all these little robots start emerging to like pick up pieces of the stuff he just swept out on the floor. Like that's kind of like our generation. We thrive in chaos, and like that part of digital is going to be very, very chaotic over the next few years. And there's no better people to have in that position than our generation that came up, during that time of chaos when there was nothing established and we had to make it up on the fly. Like, I am so excited about that because, it's really going to be chaos.
Yeah. No, yeah. It reminds me, that comment reminds me of, our mutual friend Josh Stella. He's like, drop me in the middle of the ocean and I'll find land. It's that kind of I think it's that kind of mentality where, again, if you had to build it for the first time, that's a mentality going into any uncertain any bout of uncertainty. It's like you just it's going to be all right on the other side, even if you feel like a little boat bobbing in a storm along the way. You're going to find land.
Well, that's one of the themes that's also emerged in these shows is, a client would say, well, can you do this? And someone in the room would go, sure. And then they go back to the office and go, so I told them we could do this. And everyone in the room would go, we don't know how to do that. And then that became the moment where everyone went, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Right. And like those robots, right? Everyone would sort of coalesce around that idea, and before you knew it, it was like, oh, we're now building that thing that nobody thought could be done. So yeah, this has been awesome talking to you both. Really good reconnecting. Great to see you both, and appreciate you sharing your stories. If Ritesh were here, it would even be more the sense of this. But like, I always feel like at the end of these, it's like I wish we had another 2 or 3 hours, because it's like we've just scratched the surface. But
make an after show, man. That's
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go get a whiskey. Let's do some day drinking before.
I didn't tell this story about how we flew out from K2, out to the West Coast to crash a Razorfish party, and then flew back.
Right, and I didn't tell the story of how I think it was Chan's assistant that accidentally, when they were trying to figure out the vacation schedule for the rest of the year, she inadvertently exported the entirety of the company's salary and bonuses and stock options and whatnot. And so Jason Calacanis was calling around anybody he knew at agency to try and figure out what the salary story was. Then it could be a big story on Silicon Alley Reporter. And there are many other stories that are like that. I never got to talk about the privacy pods. Never didn't get to talk about Tito Puente playing at our holiday party a year before he died. So yeah, there are plenty of to Kyle, to your point, they're only scratching the surface. But hey, I want to thank you, Kyle. Being and Ritesh, of course, being the glue that has brought again these old stories back. Old timers, as Tom knows very well, but just because we're old doesn't mean we're dead.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there is wisdom. There is wisdom in wisdom in those years of experience that I cherish and will never forget.
Yeah.
Like more to all of our stories. It's not over yet.
Yeah, exactly. There's more to come. All right, hang on here. Let me wind this thing down, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.